Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome to the Investigative Journal, the alternative to the alternative news, a nickname given to this show years ago because of our stance and our information that we give out almost every day regarding the Vatican Jesuit New World Order. Yesterday on this show, by the way, I'm Greg Anthony, and if you're listening, stay tuned for this whole hour because I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday regarding, I call it maybe a history lesson, Jesuit Vatican 101, because there are many people that have no idea about this, about how the Vatican and Jesuits play a role in controlling the leaders of the world. And yesterday we started going through some terms that are used freely, but yet not understood. And we talked about the Illuminati, how the Jesuits are involved in that, Freemasonry, etc., etc. Defined the Black Pope, talked about who really the Knights of Malta are, what the New World Order means, things like when we say international banksters. I could pick up there. What is that? Well, really, it's an expression that is used to describe what I describe as Jesuit-controlled financial cabal that controls the leaders and governments of many of the nations in this world. Some people allege that the Jews, yes, the Jews run the banking system. However, the research that I've shown, and others, has shown me that the Jesuit-controlled papal Rome is by far the number one financial entity in the world. Jesuit-controlled papal Rome rules the financial world through the Vatican's banking and financial interests. In Rome, throughout Europe, and in the USA, and through the wealthy Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. Now, Dr. Stanley Monteith, on page 58 of his book, Brotherhood of Darkness, written in 2000, tells us, some sincere people believe that the Jews or the Jewish bankers are behind the world conspiracy. There are many clues that lead people to that conclusion. But, he says, he can assure you that the evidence has been planted, or to divert attention away from the truth. Indeed, some folks like to point to the Rothschild banking dynasty as proof that the Jews run international banking. However, one of the titles of the Rothschilds, according to author F. Tupper Saucy, is, quote, Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. Some folks would argue that the Rothschilds should be labeled court Jews of papal Rome. Some would also argue that the Knights Templar Order was the first international banking cabal, at least on the European continent. And it's worth noting that when the Knights Templar Order was suppressed, the Knights of Malta, a Roman Catholic religious military order, absorbed some of the great wealth of the Knights Templar. Many of the world's richest bankers have been Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. The Jesuit-controlled international banksters, that's the title that we should use when we talk about international banksters, have helped to foment and bankroll many of the revolutions and wars of the last 3 to 4 centuries, and in the process have profited nicely from the murder of millions of people. So yesterday we gave you a definition of the Jesuit order. We also gave you a good definition and understanding of the Knights of Malta, exactly what the term New World Order should mean, and how papal Rome is the real power behind it all. And then I wanted to start off, because you've heard this a lot, Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Now, In a book written by Brad and Sherry Steiger, Conspiracies in Secret Society, the protocols of the learned, they say, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, it would seem, is an amalgam of plagiarized political pamphlets, fictional documents, and various inflammatory works, many of which, in their original context, did not even concern themselves with Jews, but were attacks on Jesuits. In the opinions of some researchers, the protocols of learned elders of Zion may truly be the mother of all anti-Semite conspiracies. No matter how often the work is proved to be a forgery, some conspiracy theorists will continue to cite the protocols as proof that the international group of Jewish bankers is plotting to take over the world. So, when you hear about that, you'll hear, I remember when I was first doing a lot of stories about the Vatican and how they set the Jews up as fall guys. They would say, well, read the protocols of learned elders of Zion. And this to me was a Jesuit document put there for a reason to basically out the Jews. And the point I try to make is, sure, there are many Jews in control of things, but they are or should be called papal court Jews. They're working for Rome. Now, nothing is truer than the Knesset and the politicians of Israel, which have sold out the people, just like the American politicians have done here. And a good person to go to, he's no longer with us. He passed away a couple of years ago. It was a guy by the name of Barry Chamish. He still has his website up. Get his books. A former journalist from Israel that told you the truth about the Vatican control of that country as well. So anyway, what about P2 Masonry? Everybody's heard about P2, right? The Masonic Lodge, or have you? Now, there's a Masonic propaganda group, number 2, known as P2, with its headquarters being in Rome. The P2 Club is a propaganda society of the world's elites, which includes high-ranking Roman Catholic prelates and, of course, Jesuits. Now, I know a lot about the P2 because when I was working in Rome during the time of the biggest Vatican bank scandal in history, and I'm sure there'll be a bigger one coming up, the P2 Lodge was instrumental in taking control of the finances and bilking the Italian people out of millions and millions of dollars, leading to banks being going under, and also the murder of a guy by the name of bank president of the Bank of Ambrosiano, Robert Calvi. Now, many priests, high-level Vatican priests, bishops, etc., were outed as being members of P2 in French and Italian newspapers. And this was just after the murder of the Pope, remember, the one before John Paul II, that only was in office for 33 days, and we've talked much about him. So when you talk about the P2 Lodge, I know a lot about it. I was there, saw it, and basically was just shaking my head at the time and go, how could this be? And one guy you got to remember, it was the head of the Vatican Bank at the time. Okay? And this bishop, I talk a lot about a bishop. He was basically the head of the Vatican Bank. His name was Cardinal Marcinkus from Chicago. And boy, what stories I have about him when he was still alive. And I'll get to that another day. But trust me, the P2 Lodge was basically a Jesuit organization. Okay, well, what about, we get to a lot of these revolutions. And I wanted to talk about things because many people shake their head when they say, wow, you say the Jesuits were instrumental in many of these revolutions, like the Russian, the French, the American. So let me just give you a few facts from other people that have written about it. Now, what is the Russian Revolution? The Revolution of 1917, which the government of the Tsar was overthrown. It consisted of two distinct revolutions. The first was the February Revolution, being the uprising of March-February, in which a parliamentarian government headed by Kerensky came to power. The second, October Revolution, being the uprising of November-October, in which this government, was replaced by the Soviet government led by the Bolshevik communists under Lenin in the October Revolution alone. Now, we are told by some folks that the Jews financed the Russian Bolshevik Revolution. Consider the following quotations, though. Another point is made to convince us that the Jews or the Jewish bankers are our enemy, that Jacob Schiff provided $20 million to finance the Bolshevik Revolution. Did Jacob Schiff really help the Bolsheviks? Because of the progressive dumbing down of our people, most Americans don't realize that there are two Russian revolutions. The first revolution was in March 1917, the second in October of that same year. The revolution began in St. Petersburg when a contingent of military recruits refused to fire on anti-government demonstrators. The Tsar was forced to abdicate. Alexander Kerensky was chosen to lead Russia until elections could be held. When it became obvious that he intended to continue the war, the German High Command approached Lenin, who was living in Switzerland. They offered him money and transportation to go to Russia to overthrow Kerensky. During World War I, the American State Department was responsible for collecting intelligence information. Their files confirm that Jacob Schiff opposed the Tsar, and after Kerensky had taken power, Jacob Schiff sent Kerensky a telegram congratulating him. But the Bolshevik Revolution didn't take place until 7 months later. Now, author Anthony Sutton examined the State Department's intelligence files, and he found evidence that Schiff opposed the Bolsheviks and encouraged our State Department to oppose them. The document, The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, first appeared in Russia in 1905, and it claimed that Zionists were behind the wars and revolutions of the 19th century and planned to seize control of the world. Many Russians believed the protocols, and they began to persecute the Jews and destroy their property. When the Tsar refused to intervene, Jacob Schiff began plotting to depose him. He provided revolutionary literature to the Russian soldiers, captured the Japanese during the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. It is even possible that some of the soldiers who participated in the March 1917 revolution read Jacob Schiff's literature, so he may have played a part in inciting the March 1917 revolution. But that was not the Bolshevik Revolution, folks, which occurred 7 months later. Now, when Anthony Sutton researched the State Department intelligence files, he found documents showing that the English and American financiers provided funding for the Bolsheviks, but that fact is never, ever mentioned. Okay, let me stop right there. And I bring this up for a reason, because I started researching a guy that started the American Foreign Diplomatic Service at Georgetown, the Jesuit priest named Father Edmund Walsh. Now, Father Edmund Walsh is a key figure here because at this time he was heading up by the Vatican and our State Department what was called a charitable endeavor to go to Russia and provide food and other things for the starving people there, the Bolsheviks. Now, Walsh is an interesting figure, and I make the claim that he was a spy working with our intelligence department to basically provide the funds, bring the money over in the guise of a priest helping out poor people. And if you look at Father Edmund Walsh, he's not just a priest. This guy was involved in many different things. He was in Mexico at the time of the revolution. He was in Iraq before, when many of the people, this was in the 30s in Iraq. So this guy was all over the place. And now he has a page on Eisenhower's website when he passed away. And he founded the School for Foreign Service that still provides diplomats to our country from Georgetown Jesuit University, right next to the White House. So I believe he plays a big part in this behind the scenes. Look him up. Jesuit Father Edmund Walsh. Now, when Anthony Sutton researched the State Department intelligence file, like I said, he showed that the English and American financiers provided funding for the Bolsheviks. And what better way to get it to them than to do it through the guise of a Vatican charitable organization going there? Now, Lenin was a problem. And so Walsh, I believe, was instrumental in getting Stalin into power, because there was a deal cut then that said, you will get this money from the American financiers if you allow Stalin into the top of the Bolshevik Party. And basically he was. And we know that Stalin was schooled at a Jesuit university, a Jesuit school in Russia, and at a place called Tiflis. And I call him Father Joseph Stalin, okay? And when you go back to many of my shows tracing his background and the Jesuits, you'll see the connection. And that's never in the history books. It can't be there. They've got to keep that one out. Now, could it be that the 20 million gift to the Bolsheviks was contrived to divert attention away from the real source of the funding, the 20 million that they say Jacob Schiff gave? And I think that Stanley Monteith, who wrote that book, Brotherhood of Darkness, and that's on page 60 and 62, that question, had a good point. Now, what is the word we talk about? I think they use the Jews as a scapegoat, right? What? What is a scapegoat? Well, let's get the definition so we know exactly what we're talking about. It's a person, a group, or a thing upon whom the blame for the mistakes or crimes of others is thrust. To make a scapegoat. Scapegoating the Jews. The Jews have often, folks, been falsely accused throughout the centuries of blood libel, using human blood in various religious rituals, of desecrating or torturing Roman Catholic Eucharistic wafers into the body of Christ during the Roman Catholic Mass, and even causing the Black Death in Europe and Asia in the 14th century. Simon Wiesenthal's book, on page 14 of his book, Everyday Remembrance Day, A Chronicle of Jewish Martyrdom, sums this up well. He says, blame the Jews for all the evil. It's a syndrome. Hated of the Jews grew as they came to be regarded as the cause of every catastrophe. If there was too much rain or too little, if the harvest was poor, earthquakes, floods, fires, famine, lightning, the plague, everything was laid at the door of the Jews, even though as many Jews were among the victims of such catastrophes as the rest of the population. However, the Jews were responsible for all calamities. The false accusations about Jewish blood libel started with the Greeks and Romans, folks. Later, the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church used these false blood libel accusations against the Jews, which often led to bloody massacres of European Jews. The only evidence presented in these false accusations of Jewish blood libel was testimony obtained from Jews who had been tortured. Ignored in all of this are the commands found in the Old Testament forbidding Jews from consuming blood. Equally ridiculous is the idea that Jews steal Roman Catholic Eucharistic wafers in order to torture a piece of bread that has allegedly become Jesus Christ. Yet this allegation has in the past been made against Jews by Roman Catholics, often leading to massacres of Jews. Isn't it interesting that you see a lot of anti-Semitic talk today in Congress? Isn't it interesting that Nancy Pelosi would not censor or not put out a censorship of what a couple congresswomen said about the Jews? Isn't it interesting it's going on even today? But who is guilty, really, of fomenting all these wars and revolutions? These things, folks, they're not just a coincidence. I don't think the American Revolution was, the Civil War. I don't think any of the major wars were just a coincidence between one nation hating another. They were not. But who's guilty for fomenting these wars and revolutions? It's going on as we speak today. It's not the Jews. Please consider these quotes before you make up your mind. Here's one that I love to use, but it's from Marquis de Lafayette, written in 1757 to 1834. It is my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars of Europe. Now, how about this one from Mr. Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln? The American Civil War would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of her noblest sons. Over 600,000 Americans were killed in that war. The public here's another one by Edmund Paris in The Secret History of the Jesuits. The public is practically unaware of the overwhelming responsibility carried by the Vatican and its Jesuits in the starting of 2 world wars. Now, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion has been used for several centuries to try to convince folks of an alleged Jewish conspiracy to rule the world. Yet the protocols were originally written in France as a satire that accused the Jesuits, not the Jews. That's as interesting. This was written in France as a satire that accused the Jesuits, not the Jews, of lusting for world domination, but the Jesuits edited the protocols so that the Jews were substituted in the place of the Jesuits as the conspirators who are lusting after world dominion. Now, let's ask yourselves a question. Who controls this international banking? Should you look deeper than just what you hear? The elite. The highest levels of Freemasonry, Hollywood, the American mainstream media, listed below. There's so much that these people have controlled that it's tough to get to the truth. That's how we're going to end the first half hour, but we're going to get there. And when we talk about this blaming of the Jews, I have a perfect example of it that just happened maybe 5 to 10 years ago, and it's personal experience by doing this story for over 15 years. And maybe 15 years ago, I'll tell you what, there was a concerted effort to keep this person, me, quiet. And boy, I'll tell you, it told me one thing. I was in the right direction. I'll give you a few of those remembrances, a few of those things that really happened to me when we come back in the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on First Amendment Radio.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour. And remember, the Supreme Jesuit Command, as the promo said, doesn't want you to hear this information. Because if this stuff gets out, folks, and the mainstream gets it, the mainstream of people, you know that the media is bought and paid for. Boy, I'll tell you, they're going to have a hard time taking over America. But we're going to keep pushing it. We're going to keep fighting for one thing, and that is to get this story out. Because the question has to be answered. Do Americans need to be told what Jesuits really are? I mean, can't we just forget about it and just say, hey, they're just a bunch of fun-loving priests, very intelligent? Ask yourself that question. Do you think Americans need to know? And if any are ignorant, let them inform themselves of their history without delay, I say. No time is to be lost. Their workings are before you in every day's events. They are a secret society. That's why it's hard to get through to you. That what they do is people say, well, where's your evidence? Well, you have to sometimes rely on circumstantial evidence and things that they did in the past, and then look today to all the people in your government who are connected to them in some way, shape, or form. Now, they're kind of like a secret society, a sort of Masonic order. Now, you know what's so interesting? And I bet you they were behind this statement that was just made on the news yesterday. The so-called Progressive Democratic Party now, which has morphed into socialism, and we've told you who created socialism, the Jesuits, in their the Paraguay reductions in the 1600s. Go read about it. So all of you people out there who want socialism, these are the guys you should be applauding. But anyway, so we have, the Jesuits. Who, basically, who are they? And they're like a Masonic order, a secret society, super added features of revolting odiousness and 1,000 times more dangerous. Now, people will say, Greg, you're exaggerating. They're just a bunch of old priests or young priests doing God's work. Well, listen, I bet you, like I said, they were behind what just was said yesterday by these so-called progressive socialist Democrats. You know what they're doing now? They're getting this word out and it's coming, you're hearing it on CNN. Fox is uttering it from the point of view that it's crazy. But they're saying that Trump supporters are a cult. They're being brainwashed. And I say the Jesuits and these people always accuse people of what they are. And if there's ever been a cult in the world, it's the Vatican. And boys, start looking at it right from their traditions all the way down. And I know best because I grew up as one, a Catholic. And I know exactly what they do to you. And you don't even know it. You have to really break out of it in the end. But it is the biggest cult. But they usually will call their enemies, so to speak, what they really are. So anyway, I said these people are 1,000 times more dangerous than the average Masonic person, okay? They are not merely priests or priests of one religious creed. They are merchants, lawyers, editors, men of any profession, astronomers, you name it, having no outward badge by which to be recognized. They're all over in your society. Somebody said to me one time, Greg, you think there's a Jesuit under every rock? And I said, you hit the nail on the head. They can assume any character, that of angels of light or ministers of darkness, to accomplish their one great end. Remember what their motto is? The ends justify the means. The service upon which they are sent, whatever that service may be. They are educated men, prepared, and sworn to start at any moment and in any direction and for any service, commanded by the general of their order. We talked about who he was yesterday, the Black Pope, Jesuit Superior General, bound to no family, community, or country by the ordinary ties which bind men, and sold for life to the cause of the Roman Pontiff. And that was written by guess who? Oh, must have been some conspiracy theorist. Must have been somebody like that who knows nothing. You know who actually wrote it? Samuel F.B. Morse. He wrote, this, he was born in 1791, died in 1872, a great American inventor of the telegraph. And he wrote a book called The Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States because he understood exactly what I'm saying on this show. He understood it 100 years ago or more. And what did he do back then? He couldn't use the internet. He couldn't just fly to Rome. He took a ship. It probably took him, I don't know how many days to get across the Atlantic. But he went to Rome because he understood when he was here that there was a conspiracy by the Vatican to overthrow this country back then. And he came back, wrote this book, and told people that. It appeared in newspapers back then. People understood it. So how has it changed? Why don't people get it today? Because as the years went on, all of this information gets put in the category of a conspiracy theory. That's why you won't hear it on Fox News. That's why you're not, and that's the conservative news broadcast that's supposed to be telling you the truth against these evil Democrats who have turned into socialists. But don't you see this is a Jesuit plot? They're putting Americans against Americans. They've got 50% of the country hating the other 50%, and you see it every day. You see that now on college campuses. Conservative speakers are being boycotted, can't even speak. You're seeing this group called Antifa running around basically clubbing people who don't agree with this progressive policies, and the police are doing nothing. You're seeing anarchy just grow in this country. It's happened before, and they're going to do it again. Samuel Morse told you that. Please listen to what we say here. If you don't listen to anything else, listen to these few words I'm going to say. The Vatican-led Jesuit order is your biggest enemy. It is the head of the snake. It is where all this comes from. And you say, well, why do these politicians, it's impossible. No, the politicians are like, they have a nose for money. And the richest organization in the world happens to be in Rome. And who do you think they're going to take their orders from? They're going to take them from the richest people in the world, as well as those who have been doing this for hundreds of years. Do you think that Obama, Bush, Trump could understand this and really, or basically all these leaders of America have the ability to put out this system that they're calling a new world order? No, this has been planned for hundreds of years, and they go to their mentors, just like the founding fathers went to Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general back then, who ought to be considered one of our founding fathers, because he was the strategist behind the Revolutionary War. This wasn't just coincidence. It wasn't just the Boston Tea Party. And boy, please, look into this organization. Now, in 1828, an organization in Vienna was formed which was called the Saint Leopold Foundation. The plan was then to operate under a mask of religion, which would ensure its safety from any governmental interference. They were called the Divine Writers. The despotic European monarchs who were guided by the Jesuits had formed this holy alliance in 1815 at the end of the Vienna Congress of Vienna, hoped to accomplish by intrigue and innuendo what could not be done by bullets and bayonets. All right, so we're going back to 1828. Now, Samuel Morse was telling us about this conspiracy that was going on under this Holy Alliance, with Rome involved in the Jesuits. For what? Well, they've always wanted this country. That's why when the Pope comes here, he steps on the tarmac, and if it's not in Florida and it's 190 degrees, well, maybe he'll kiss the rug. He kisses the pavement because it's his land, not because he loves you. Now, the Habsburg family of Austria was the most powerful Roman Catholic ruling family in Europe, and consequently the most cruel, despotic, and reactionary, and had the American people not been so absorbed in the upbuilding of the Republic, they would have detected the hypocrisy of this holy fraud. The Saint Leopold Foundation, we don't hear much about that. The Knights of Columbus and other Roman Catholic organizations in the USA are the successors, the beneficiaries of this offspring of the Saint Leopold Foundation. And I wanted to give you a little basis for what we said yesterday. I was defining to you who the Knights of Columbus were, who the Knights of Malta are, and basically where they came from. And they came from the Saint Leopold Foundation. One of the Habsburg brothers back then, Prince Rudolf, was a member of the Roman Curia, the Cardinal Rudolf Habsburg of Olmütz. It was easy for the Jesuits of the Vatican to operate through him as the agent for the foundation of funds which poured into the United States in a stream of gold. Nor did the Vatican furnish all the funds. They were most likely furnished by high contracting parties of the Holy Alliance, in accordance with the provisions of the secret Treaty of Verona. In short, the immense sums of money distributed among bishops and archbishops of the Roman Catholic Church in this country in establishing cities where none existed were used solely as gigantic political slush funds to corrupt and ultimately destroy the government and set up a monarchy instead. 1 year after the Saint Leopold Foundation had been established, it received the recognition and blessing of the Pope. Catholic Europe, especially from Ireland, then began pouring into this country, every nook and cranny of that poverty-stricken continent in many cases, their passages being advanced from this slush fund. The Roman bishops of every large city from New York to San Francisco then began massing the foreign vote. The massed Roman vote in the cities placed the balance of political power in the hands of Rome, in the hands of these bishops and priests. Intimidation has always been the big stick when a man in public office presumed to oppose the advance of these ecclesiastical bosses. With the rapidly increased foreign immigration back then, these agents of the Jesuit-controlled divine writers of Europe, operating through the Jesuits and their lay agents, have made progress beyond their wildest dreams. City councils, state legislatures, and even the Congress have been browbeaten and bribed. And this Saint Leopold Foundation is a great Jesuit spy system, which is not confined to the ecclesiastics of the Roman Church, but embraces every element of our society. Nor indeed is it restricted to the Roman Catholics, for the Jesuits do not hesitate to use non-Catholic tools whenever it is possible. In fact, the Jesuits prefer non-Catholics, for in this way attention is distracted from them. In case of failure, it's always preferable to use non-Catholics. The Jesuits often use Protestant Freemasons, Papal Court Jews, and various Jesuit front groups, such as the Illuminati, as we talked about yesterday, to carry out the Jesuits' sinister and nefarious operations, thus shifting the blame onto others for their own nasty deeds. The priest of every parish in this country is the kingpin in this web of spying and reports regularly to his bishop every item of interest, directly or indirectly. And, I'm talking about things that were going on during this period in our country. It's the same today. It's no different. The confessional box in the Roman Catholic clearinghouse whereby the popes keep his finger on the pulse of the world. The Leopold lines that have been passed on are honeycombed in every avenue of civic, state, and national life even today. There are, to begin with, the police departments of the various cities, 90% of whom conservatively say fourth-degree Knights of Columbus. They are always at the back of the call of the Catholic hierarchy. Let me give you a story to back this up. Now, years ago I did a story with a guy by the name of a former New York cop named Jim Rothstein. Okay, and Jim then went into Vice and then was a head investigator, detective, into the pedophilia rings back in the 70s and 80s in New York and in the country. Now, there was a case where we had talked many times about a former Cardinal Spellman of New York. He was also the chaplain of our military in Vietnam. Now, Cardinal Spellman was considered to be the most powerful man in the United States. Now, many people laugh when I say that, but it's not me saying that. It's many people who knew who really he was. Jim Rothstein was one of them. Now, there was a case where there was a young boy who had information and came forward to the police when Rothstein was doing investigations regarding pedophilia and child molestation. And he accused Cardinal Spellman and basically stole one of his shoes out of his bedroom in downtown New York, where, in St. Peter's or wherever he was, St. Patrick's, and told the story that he was molested by Cardinal Spellman. Now, basically what happened was Cardinal Spellman talked to the police who were on his payroll, so to speak, and this story never did get out. Jim was told to let it go. Basically what happened, they said the kid stole his shoes. Yeah, just what he needed. The kid was like wearing a size 12, right? So basically, it shows you that the police force there protected Cardinal Spellman. So what they're saying here about the police also being under their control is still true today. Now, there are always at the beck and call of the Catholic hierarchy. The chief duty as Catholic citizens is to obey their bishops in the Holy See. That's why, when you start looking back at some of these child kidnappings And one comes to mind of a kid by the name of Johnny Gosh. And Johnny was a 10-year-old or 11-year-old paper boy in Des Moines, Iowa that was basically taken in and put into one of these pedophilia rings, child trafficking rings. And the way the whole thing went down was that the police were told to stand down and did nothing. Now I'm talking about the local police, the state police, as far as down as you can go and as far as up as you can go. It was clear that Gosh was taken against his will, and they stood down for 48 hours saying they could do nothing, even when there was eyewitness evidence that he was put into a car and taken, kidnapped. They should have got on that case like that, his mother said, but they didn't. So what am I saying? I'm saying it goes on today. And these pedophilia rings go right to the doorstep of the highest churches in our country, in the highest offices in the states, and in Washington. And this idea that Jeffrey Epstein is this crazy elite, this goes real deep. And we've talked about Rome, the Vatican pedophilia rings for years on this show. And it always seems to get worse, not better. And that's a quote from Jim Rothstein, who said, when I asked him, and he was trying to get to the bottom of this, even having a conversation with, well, we'll get to that in another day. But Jim said, I asked him the question, I said, is it worse today than it was in the 80s, pedophilia? He said, you're darn right it is. Now, there are Jesuit college graduates, folks in every state, who are specially trained, I think, as expert spies, yeah. The principal branches of the Leopold lines, please remember this, that Burke McCarty's book, and I got it right in front of me. It's a book you have to get. It was written, in 1924, and it was the truth about the Lincoln assassination. And she used a different name to protect herself. Still see, this Leopold line is still operating today under various different names. The German Catholic Central headquarters in St. Louis and Detroit, the Third Order of St. Francis, the Catholic Laymen's Council, the League of the Sacred Heart, and the Catholic Women's Council. These organizations are all branches of the Leopold line spy system. This great spy system penetrates today every avenue of our social life. The field of journalism has been invaded until a Roman Catholic sits at many important editorial desks of the great newspapers from coast to coast. And whether they're Roman Catholic or not, they're bound to the basic tenets of Jesuitism. That's why our media, there is no freedom of the press in this country anymore. But nobody goes to this far to get to the real perpetrators. You'll hear it from the conservative broadcasters regarding journalism is dead. Look at the rampant lying, the fake news of the CNN left-wing journalists. This is all orchestrated. There is no freedom of the press. There will not be freedom of the press until we can get this story out. Ask yourself why you can't get this out on Fox News. Now, spies are members of all important commissions, public works, school boards, library boards, housing commissions, naturalization departments, and are even active members of American committees. Okay? Wow. On every textbook committee. Okay, now this was on Burke McCarty's book. This was from her book, and I'm going to end with this. I got about 2 minutes. It's called The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln, first published in 1924. This is on page 74 to 79. On every textbook committee selected to pass on books to be used in our public schools sits a Roman Catholic priest or his personal representative. He is there for the purpose of seeing to it that every truth derogatory to the Roman Catholic Church is eliminated. and everything that will in any way reflect credit upon that institution is incorporated. This explains why in that assassination of Lincoln has been carefully suppressed, so that the extent of the knowledge about this great of all tragedies, the greatest of all tragedies of the history of our country, does not exceed these words. President Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater April 14, 1865, by an actor named John Wilkes Booth. Andrew Johnson was immediately sworn into office. That's all you hear. Isn't it true? All you hear is John F. Kennedy was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. What about, what about 9/11? It was our planes were hijacked. And that story, that simple story carried on forever. That's what they do. They never change it. And the books in that paragraph I just read tells you why you don't hear this story. It also tells you, remember I talked about that priest, I'm going to end it right here, Father Edmund Walsh. He was sent over to the Nuremberg trials to oversee the judge there to get out any bad words about the Vatican or Jesuits regarding Hitler and the killing of 6 million Jews. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.